Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Monday edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We're back here, and we're got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about a number of different things. In the NFL, not a ton of news going on right now, but there have been some rookie minicamps that have started over this past weekend. 6 teams as of Saturday and Sunday have opened rookie minicamps, so we're going to talk a little bit about that in the first segment. And also we're going to discuss some fantasy football a little bit as well, and some rookie outlooks as well. And make sure you stick around for later in the show, and we're going to get into some college football. I'll be giving you my top 5 college quarterbacks this coming season, as well as a USC Trojans preview on their upcoming season after they just picked up a couple of big-name recruits over the past couple of days. So we'll talk about that. But before we start, would like to ask that you guys like and follow the show. If you have a question or anything that you want to add to the show, definitely do that. If you want to make yourself heard, definitely go over to the Super Chat and do that. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great after all. So we thrive on your energy and your insights, and whether it is just a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or just an opinion that you just want to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And if you want to make sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that, and that is, of course, the Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to support the channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, so we appreciate all of the support that you guys give us. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit that Super Chat button. Let's keep this show interactive and exciting, and if you prefer, you can also go to the website at gsmcsports.net to tip, donate, and leave a question or a comment there. We couldn't do what we do without you guys, and we're thankful to have you as part of our community. And once again, that link, if you want to hit the website, is gsmcsports.net. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the show here. First segment, we're going to talk about just some rookie minicamps and some other NFL news that has been going around as of right now, or as of this past weekend, I should say. There are 6 teams that have opened rookie minicamp, those being the Ravens, Cowboys, Packers, Chiefs, Eagles, and Seahawks. All of those teams opening their rookie minicamps this past weekend. In Baltimore, the expectation there around the first practices or so is that first-round pick Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, and second-round pick Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. Both will be immediate contributors, is what it is looking like so far. Looking pretty good in their first couple of practices with Baltimore. Obviously, this is very, very early on in the process here. Not everybody is at the facilities just yet, so the rookies are just kind of trying to get acclimated to NFL life and everything. So very early on, but there have been some positive signs from a number of different camps out there with Baltimore. Offensive line is also another area to just kind of keep an eye on during this rookie minicamp process. They added 3 offensive line players in the NFL draft, so obviously that is a point of emphasis for the Baltimore Ravens, trying to keep Lamar Jackson protected and also keep opening those holes for Derrick Henry to keep that running game as effective as they usually are, especially after last year being as effective as they were with Derrick Henry. So offensive line is definitely a priority over there, so just a couple of things to keep an eye on there. Moving on to some other teams that have got their rookie minicamps going on. The Cowboys are another team that opened, and one of the biggest takeaways from the first day of practice for the Cowboys rookies was the energy that the coaching staff has exhibited going into this first day of rookie minicamp. Obviously, this is the first open practice of the Brian Schottenheimer era. He is a first-year head coach for the Dallas Cowboys this year, so a lot of pressure on him, as there always is with any coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but especially Brian Schottenheimer, as he seems to be Jerry Jones, his pick alone. I don't think, just from talking to a few Dallas Cowboys fans, I don't think Schottenheimer was the guy that they were necessarily hoping to get in this coaching cycle that we just passed this past offseason. But either way, they have Brian Schottenheimer there now, and this is his first open practice. As far as the players are concerned, a couple of notable takeaways. The rookie third-round pick that the Cowboys had, cornerback Siobhan Revel Jr., he is battling back from an injury from last year. He was considered a possible first-round pick, but then, of course, he had his torn ACL 4 weeks into his final season at East Carolina, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. He did do some workouts today, though, this weekend. During his first NFL practice, he participated in some stretching and some conditioning drills with some of his teammates before doing some rehab work during the position drills. So he's still trying to work his way back. Appears to look good, reportedly, according to all of the people who know those sorts of things. He's been seen running and cutting during practice. So all signs are pointing, in a positive direction in terms of him. It's just that's a question that they're just going to kind of, have to have answered. They're going to have to keep an eye on that as the offseason and training camp and all of that starts to really ramp up here in the next couple of weeks or so. But he did look good, so that is a positive sign. And another team that is actually dealing with a draft pick that has an injury or a lingering injury is the Kansas City Chiefs. They, of course, were one of the 6 teams that did open up their rookie minicamps this weekend. And the player that they are concerned about is the first-round pick, offensive tackle Josh Simmons. He continues to work his way back from his knee injury that he suffered midway through his final season at Ohio State. Definitely trying to work back there and be ready for the training camp and preseason and all those things. But during his first NFL practice, he did not actually participate in any 11-on-11 drills or individual drills, but he did participate in some position drills with the rest of the offensive linemen. So some, silver lining there that he was able to get some sort of work in his first practice. So definitely a good thing there. He's still, a little bit ways to go here. Hopefully he can get back up to speed as we get through rookie minicamp and start to enter mandatory camps and training camp and all of that stuff. So valuable reps is definitely required at this point in the whole process. The more reps you can get, the more you can get used to the system and all of that. And, of course, battling through that injury. If he can come back to 100%, they're going to have a very, very good offensive lineman that they got there with that last pick in the first round. So something to keep an eye on there. Another story that actually caught my eye a little bit was in Seattle, where they are doing their rookie mini camps right now. Of course, Jalen Milroe was selected in the in the draft as well, a little bit later on in the draft. So not really an immediate threat to Sam Darnold or anything like that. But he has looked pretty good from all reports that are coming out of Seattle. He is, impressing. He's got very good work ethic, and that really seems to be the theme with Jalen Milroe from everything that I've read about and looked up. It seems like he has the right mindset for the NFL life, which is a good thing. You definitely want that, and especially a guy who's, drafted in the later rounds, so probably comes in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, as most players in that situation most likely would, thinking that they should have been drafted higher or, whatever the case. Just a little extra motivation and all that. But during his first mini-camp practice, he and fellow rookie Will Rogers, who actually went undrafted, spent the day operating a traditional NFL offense, but it didn't feature any designed runs or anything like that. So it was just pure passing is what they were working on. That seems to be the main area of concern, which it definitely makes sense because that's been kind of the concern coming out of his college in Alabama, is that his concern has been accuracy. He's got all of the tools, all the physical gifts, one of the best running quarterbacks, probably the best running quarterback in this particular class. He has a lot of upside. If he can reach his potential, he can be a very, very good quarterback, somewhere along the lines of like a Jalen Hurts or something like that. It's very possible if he can reach that kind of potential anyway. So he hasn't disappointed, obviously, very early on, first day of rookie minicamp, so there's a long way to go here before we start making any, final judgments as far as rosters and stuff like that. But it's a good start for Jalen Milroe. They're focusing on his ability to be accurate. So if they can improve upon that, he can, obviously already hurt you with his legs. So if he can improve up here, then he'll definitely, be an asset for Seattle. I don't know if he'll get any kind of playing time in the regular season, barring an injury, of course, or anything like that. But I definitely would expect him to get a lot of work in the preseason as they try and kind of work through some of the, drawbacks that he's had in college, in terms of accuracy and all that. But he has the potential to be a very, very good quarterback. So definitely something to watch there. So those are kind of the only real notable stories that are kind of going on in that first day. Obviously, it's very early, so not a whole lot to really talk about or report on in terms of minicamps, but just a few stories here and there. I did want to also add that this isn't rookie minicamp talk or anything like that, but earlier today there was an announcement that the Washington Commanders are potentially going to be hosting the 2027 NFL Draft. It's going to be in Washington, D.C., and there's also talk that might be due to a potential new stadium there at RFK Stadium. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. I've always thought Washington has been super, super overdue for a new stadium. So obviously with the new ownership and the newfound optimism in Washington with how their last season went under Jaden Daniels, there's a lot of positivity going on in Washington as far as football is concerned. So that makes sense that they want to try and build a better stadium for a potential contender. And it's been way overdue because that stadium is just an absolute mess, whether that be things falling on Jalen Hurts or things dripping, leaking from the ceiling, whatever the case is, or, just the cursed field that it is, with so many knee injuries to quarterbacks have taken place on that field. So a lot of things that are wrong with that stadium, and it'll be good to just kind of get a fresh start for Washington for sure. But I just wanted to add that in there. There's just a little piece of news that I happened to come across earlier today. So, but that's it for our first segment. We're going to just take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some fantasy football a little bit. And it's not going to be a super in-depth because I'm no fantasy football guru or anything like that. Just some players to kind of keep your eye on as guys that will probably be, getting the most kinds of points in whatever league that you happen to be, whether it's a dynasty league, a PPR, whatever the case is. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So stick around, and we'll be right back right after this, and we'll talk some fantasy football.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, guys, welcome back to the show here. We're going to get right into our topic here, but before we do, I just want to remind you guys that if you have any questions or any comments or anything like that that you want to add to the show, you can definitely do that with the Super Chat button, or you can go to the GSMCsports.net website and leave a tip, donation, or a question or a comment there to get a little bit involved in the show. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of our show here. Just going to talk about some fantasy football here. All right, so some fantasy football players to watch. obviously, like I kind of alluded to a little bit before the break there, this isn't going to be a super in-depth sort of fantasy football piece. I'm not an expert when it comes to fantasy football. I just follow, the NFL and all that. So as far as players, you can kind of look at this as either players to watch in fantasy football or just players to watch in the NFL, however you want to look at it. So that's the way we're going to do it here. So the first player that I wanted to just list here, and this is in no particular order, not saying that one guy is better than the other because he's higher on the list or anything like that. This is just a list of players. So first guy that I have on the list is Jamar Chase, wide receiver from Cincinnati, of course. He is right now probably arguably the best receiver in the league. Won the Triple Crown last year, leading in all receiving categories. So he had a tremendous year last year despite the fact of not making the playoffs. So look out for him to continue to be as productive as he has been since he came over from LSU. Right around with Joe Burrow and all of those guys. So, he's definitely a great receiver, so he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. He can do just about anything that you can ask for from a wide receiver. He can hit the home run. He can hit you in the slot. Great hands, very reliable. Just overall, very, very good receiver. Gets a lot of targets, too. So, in terms of fantasy football, you'll probably get a lot of, significant points out of him. Depending on what kind of league that you're involved in, it really will kind of depend on, how you basically put him out into your lineup. But a guy like that who can, get a number of catches, a number of touchdowns, and all of that, he can absolutely be useful to you in fantasy football. Another guy on the list here, it goes without saying, Saquon Barkley, won just about every kind of record that you could imagine last year. Was just a few yards short of Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record, but he did not play in the final game of the season either, so he may have got it if he would have played in that final game. But Eric Dickerson still did it in less games too, so, still, Saquon Barkley had a tremendous year last year and was a huge catalyst into why Philadelphia was able to win the Super Bowl ultimately, even though Saquon didn't necessarily have the greatest of games in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs did a pretty good job of kind of taking him out of the game, although that's kind of the only thing that they did well in that game. But, Saquon Barkley has gotten them there. He may not have had a tremendous game in the Super Bowl, but he got them there, and he was a huge reason why they got to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. If he's not on that roster, I'm not sure the Eagles get to the Super Bowl, much less win it, because just having a weapon like him, it just causes so much attention having to be paid by defenses to that one player that it opens up a lot more options for the offense. And what better offense to have more options than an offense that already has Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Those guys, they're tremendous. And even the tight end, Dallas Goedert, is a solid tight end too. So, he is a tremendous player, and he helps everybody, makes everybody on that team better just by simply being there and being as effective as he is, whether it's, breaking through tackles, hurdling backwards over players, whatever the case. He can do it all, and he would be useful to anybody who's starting a fantasy football team. I know when I used to be really into fantasy football when I was a little bit younger, it was along the days where people would kind of tend to draft running backs with the first pick. Now, I haven't been super into fantasy football since then, so I don't know if it's still a thing, but it feels like it probably would be for a guy like Saquon Barkley. If he's there and you're picking, in your draft in the first round, then, I think you'd be a fool to pass him up, because yes, you can get other players for, high quality players, high quality points and all that stuff. But Saquon can do so much, and he's so effective as it is that, it's a no brainer really. If he's out there, you definitely want to scoop him up. So moving on to another guy that you definitely want to keep an eye on and definitely want to try and get if you can is Justin Jefferson, wide receiver from Minnesota. Now, he along with Jamar Chase are kind of like the 1-2 in the NFL in terms of who are the better receivers in the league. Jamar Chase, of course, won the Triple Crown last year, so it's kind of hard to put any receiver over him right now. But if you're going to put any receiver over Jamar Chase at all, then Justin Jefferson would be the most logical one that you would do, because Justin Jefferson has done just about everything that Jamar Chase has done short of the Triple Crown. He's been, tremendous in Minnesota the entire time that he's been there. And every time that I see like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and all that, I just think back to that LSU team that had Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Joe Burrow. Not to mention Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back, who was very good for LSU as well. But that was an absolutely loaded offense when you look back on it. And it's pretty crazy that LSU were able to have those three guys, four guys if you count Edwards-Helaire, of course. But, those three, that trio of, receiver and quarterback, it's unbelievable. Looking back on it now, I mean, as a Gator fan, of course, my team went up against that. But just looking back on it now to see how good all of those players have become in the NFL and the careers that they have managed to, file out for themselves, it's pretty impressive that offense was able to have those three guys, pretty crazy. But Justin Jefferson, if not for a guy like him, Sam Darnold doesn't have the year that he had last year, and maybe doesn't get the contract that he got in Seattle. Although, there are some criticisms about that contract, but we won't get into all that. But he wouldn't have gotten an opportunity to be a starter elsewhere if not for a guy like Justin Jefferson. Obviously, you can point to Jordan Addison, too, as being part of that. But Justin Jefferson really is the guy that kind of drives that offense in Minnesota. So, it'll be interesting to see how Sam Darnold handles not having a guy like Justin Jefferson. He's still got decent receiving options there in Seattle, though. But it'll be interesting to see if he can get back to the same type of, effectiveness that he was having in the early parts of the season. I know he had the last two games of the year weren't great, but overall he still had a great year, and it was largely because of Justin Jefferson and the plays that he was able to make. But other guys on the list that I wanted to mention as well, quarterbacks, obviously I haven't mentioned quarterbacks yet, but Joe Burrow, we mentioned him with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, that trio of LSU players that are now in the NFL. But Joe Burrow, last year, tremendous year, despite the fact not going into the playoffs. He had MVP-like numbers, was setting records for the Cincinnati franchise. So he was, very, very good for them. And he obviously is going to be a high pick in any fantasy football league, just because of all of the plays that he's able to make. I mean, last year, and it may be pretty much the same this year, but last year the Bengals really had to get about 30-plus points per game in order to be competitive in every one of their games, because their defense struggled so much that the offense was just forced to basically score 30-plus points or lose. And luckily for the Bengals, Joe Burrow has the ability to do that. But, as we also saw last year, you can't live and die on that, because you won't make the playoffs. If you have a terrible defense and a tremendous offense, it's very, very likely that no matter how good your offense is, your defense will still be the thing that holds you back. And it definitely was the case last year. And if the Bengals can get just some sort of semblance of improvement from that defense this year, then they could be really, really dangerous in the NFL and the AFC in particular. But Joe Burrow is the guy that kind of gets it all going. He has had injury issues in the past, so as long as they can keep him upright and keep him healthy, with the offensive line consistently being an issue since he's been there, if they can shore that up a little bit and get better play out of their defensive players as well, then Joe Burrow can continue to feast, and the Bengals will be a lot better off for it than they were last year, because of, the slow start that they had last year, the 1-4 or 1-3 start, whatever it was. And then they were ultimately able to get out of that hole and get to an above 500 record. But as we all know, it was not enough, and they were unable to make the playoffs. But Joe Burrow, definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Other guys, fantasy-wise, goes without saying, reigning MVP, Josh Allen. He's going to be a guy that's going to be taken very high in a lot of leagues, as well as Lamar Jackson, who you could argue could have won the MVP for a third time in his career, and it would have been back-to-back years had he done that. But they did end up giving it to Josh Allen, and Josh Allen did deserve it. I mean, he had a great year. And I think a lot of that was people wanted Josh Allen to have it because Lamar Jackson has won 2 MVPs already. And Josh Allen, this was his first MVP award, and it was very well deserved. He was tremendous last year, and he will be probably the same this year too. You know, the biggest question with Josh Allen and the Bills is that they've got to get over that, that monkey, get that monkey off their back, as far as losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs or just losing in heartbreaking fashion in general in the playoffs. It's kind of a Bills tradition, unfortunately. But they can get over that hump, then maybe Josh Allen can get that next level, get to the next level in his career and get to a Super Bowl. It would certainly be fun to watch Josh Allen compete in the Super Bowl because of how explosive he can be and all the crazy plays, backyard football kind of plays that he can make. So that would be fun to see. So obviously we mentioned Lamar Jackson as well. He was an MVP candidate last year. Arguably could have won it, should have won it. But didn't. Of course, had over 40 touchdowns, had almost 1,000 yards rushing, and only had about 3 or 4 interceptions overall on the year. So he was very efficient, took care of the ball, and did everything that you could ask for. But a good reason why he was as good as he was his partner behind him, which was Derrick Henry, and he's on this list too. He's another guy that is going to be taken very high in other draft classes, fantasy draft classes. So, and rightfully so. I mean, he's a bowling ball of a running back who can also run real fast too. He can break away from coverage, and that's kind of his secret weapon. He's deceptively fast. You wouldn't think that a guy his size could move the way he can, but not only he's essentially the definition of a freight train. This running back, Derrick Henry is an absolute beast, and you don't need me to tell you that. If you're a football fan, he is that good. So he's on this list for sure. There are 3 rookies that I wanted to mention here as potential fantasy football targets that could have pretty good years. Ashton Jeanty, I think that's kind of obvious with the Raiders running back situation or lack thereof, but obviously Ashton Jeanty goes to the Raiders in the draft. So they're going to focus a lot of their offense through him, I believe. Geno Smith, the quarterback there, but Ashton Jeanty should get plenty of carries, plenty of numbers, and he should be pretty effective for a rookie in fantasy football. Another guy I wanted to mention was wide receiver from Carolina, Ted McMillan, being drafted by the Carolina Panthers from Arizona. So he was listed as the top wide receiver in this draft class, outside of Travis Hunter, who played the dual positions. But he's the big-bodied receiver, can go up and get those, contested catches, can beat you downfield, deep threat, and it's exactly the kind of player that Bryce Young needs for that Carolina offense. So definitely keep an eye out for him. Matthew Golden is the other guy that I wanted to mention here too, because I think he could potentially have even better numbers than Ted McMillan and possibly even better numbers than Travis Hunter, who's obviously in Jacksonville. I didn't put Travis Hunter on this list because I'm not 100% sure how they're going to utilize him yet. So I left him off the list, but he's definitely worth noting. He could get some fantasy football points here pretty significantly, depending on how he's used. But Matthew Golden, I like him here because Green Bay, it's the one thing that they've been really kind of hurting on over the past few years, and that's a big play wide receiver. Christian Watson, obviously their main number 1 guy, who's not even really a number 1 receiver, but he is the Packers' number 1 receiver. He is out with an injury. He may not be back until a little bit later in the season, so they definitely needed to get somebody in the NFL draft to kind of make up for that. And Matthew Golden, I think, will get a lot of targets. A speedy receiver, can get behind the coverage, and he could absolutely make some good plays for Jordan Love in that offense. So those are my list of guys. Whether you take it as a fantasy football outlook or just several players to watch this coming season, whatever the case, that's my list here. When we come back, we're going to talk about rookies. I'm going to give you my list of 5 guys that I think could potentially win Rookie of the Year this year, whether it's offensive or defensive Rookie of the Year. So stick with us. We'll be right back, and we'll get into some rookies here in the upcoming season. So stick with us. We'll be right back right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show here. We're going to get right into our next segment. We're going to talk about some rookies. And now that the NFL draft has passed and we've got our players all on their teams and rookie minicamps are starting and all of that, I figured now would be a good time to kind of look at a little too early look at potential Rookie of the Year candidates for this coming season. So let's get right into our first one on this list. I'm going to go with Cam Ward of the Titans. Obviously, he was picked first overall by the Titans. Have him on here because it goes without saying he is the top quarterback in this NFL draft class by a lot of people. And the Titans are relying on him heavily to potentially, be that first piece towards turning their franchise around a little bit. And I think he can do that. He is in a relatively easy division. So he could get some potentially decent games out of those stretch of games. Texans obviously are the class of that division right now. I don't think that's saying too much because the division is not typically super competitive with the Jags and Colts along with the Titans as the other teams in that division. Typically every year it seems like, at least recently anyway, it seems like it's just been the Texans since they have gotten C.J. Stroud. But, it's kind of 10-7, 9-8 sort of record is the type of record that would win that division. So Cam Ward, if he can come along and have sort of a similar kind of year that C.J. Stroud had, then maybe the Titans can do some damage. The only difference, though, is that C.J. Stroud was surrounded by a much better team around him when he came in as a rookie, and the Titans don't necessarily have that. They do have some players here and there. I don't think that they have a horrible roster or anything like that. There's some players on there that could, do some things for them, but they're still not quite there, of course, but still a long way to go in their rebuild process. But getting that quarterback is definitely very important, and the Titans are hoping that they can, hoping that they have already gotten that guy in Cam Ward. And his poise and his ability to, handle himself under pressure will go a long way to being a successful quarterback for Tennessee, especially in that division, but especially on a team that's not necessarily great and not necessarily competitive. So he'll have a lot of adversity that he'll have to get through, and his poise, I think, gives me a little bit of confidence that he'll be able to get through that and be a better quarterback on the other side. So I have Cam Ward there. Other guy that I have here is Ashton Jeanty. We did kind of briefly mention him in the last segment, but him being with the Raiders obviously desperately needed a franchise running back, and they have finally got that guy in Ashton Jeanty, and what a season he had a year ago. If not for a guy like Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, I think, runs away with the Heisman last year. Had over 2,000 yards, had about 28, 29 touchdowns, something like that, some crazy numbers that he had for Boise State. He had a heavy workload. Now, you could kind of look to the strength of schedule as a potential kind of drawback with Ashton Jeanty, but I don't really look at that too much. I mean, he is a quality running back, no matter how you slice it. You still got to make those plays. And he was able to do that. And I think he's going to be very, very good in that Raiders offense. I like that system that they're setting up there with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. I kind of feel like Pete Carroll's trying to bring over that old school Seattle Seahawks type of team, bringing it over into Las Vegas. And obviously Geno Smith used to play for the Seahawks under Pete Carroll, so it would make a lot of sense that they would try and kind of grow their offense into that same type of mold that the Seahawks had. The only thing that they need now is that shutdown defense that the Legion of Boom was in Seattle for so many years. But, of course, that was before Geno Smith's time. But their defense hasn't really gotten close to that level since those days, since Russell Wilson was still back there and everything. So it'll be fun to watch the Raiders. I do think they're going to be a better team this year. Whether or not they get to the playoffs, that's a whole other story. But they've got a tough division to contend with, a lot of good defenses in that division as well. The Chargers held just about everybody to a low point total last year. They led the league in points allowed per game last year. Obviously, the Chiefs have a pretty decent defense as well. The Broncos have gotten significantly better on defense, and even their defense was already very good anyway. But they added a couple of other guys in the offseason, both in draft and free agency, that has really impressed and really improved that defense so far. So on paper, anyway, I mean, once we get onto the field, that's a whole other story. But as far as on paper, they definitely seem like they have improved. Other guy on this list goes without saying, Travis Hunter for the Jaguars, of course. Potential to win Rookie of the Year for sure. Again, it kind of depends on how the Jags are going to use him. I tend to think that the Jags are going to use him more offensively than defensively, though they do need both positions, both defensively and offense. They do need some help there, but their offense, at least in the wide receiver room, is actually pretty good. It's pretty underrated for just, you just look at the Jaguars and you just think that, they're probably not going to be very good, but their wide receiver room is actually not bad. I mean, now that you've got Travis Hunter, if they want to use him as a wide receiver primarily, then you got him in that room. Obviously, you got Brian Thomas Jr., who had a great rookie season last year. Still got Christian Kirk, of course, too. So they did lose Evan Ingram, the tight end, to the Broncos. So that was a little bit of a loss there. But Trevor Lawrence, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. He really needs to start showing that he can be the franchise quarterback for the Jags, because they signed him to this massive contract, and now they've gotten him with a few other weapons on that team. In the past couple of years, they've went out and got some weapons, whether it be Brian Thomas last year and now Travis Hunter this year. So they're really trying to build that offense up, and now they have an offensive-minded head coach in Liam Cohen. So it's getting to the point where you're running out of excuses if you're Trevor Lawrence. You've got everything that you need to make this offense work. So it's time to actually get on the field and do it. So I like Travis Hunter as a potential Rookie of the Year candidate for sure. Another guy that I put on this list was a guy we just talked about briefly, was Matthew Golden of the Packers. I already kind of went into what I like about Matthew Golden. His speed, of course, is very attractive for any kind of offensive-minded coach. But with the way their situation is at wide receiver right now, he is a welcome addition to that Packers offense, with Christian Watson possibly being out for a number of weeks to start the season. Matthew Golden will be thrust into a role that maybe he didn't necessarily expect in his first year, but maybe he did. I mean, wide receivers, of course, they have that mindset where they are, every wide receiver thinks they're the greatest wide receiver in the league. So, I'm sure he believed that he would be there. But either way, regardless of all that, I think Matthew Golden is going to be a quality receiver for the Packers. And he's at a good organization. The Packers are one of the best run organizations in the NFL. They've got a good quarterback in Jordan Love. They're very well coached with Matt LaFleur. So they've got all of the pieces there, and Matthew Golden can be a very good asset, whether you're playing him in the slot because of his speed, or you want to get him on the outside to try and take the top off of the defense. He can do both of those things, so it'll be very fun and very exciting to watch him play, and he could be in the position to possibly win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Excuse me, sorry. But as far as the rest of this list here, excuse me, one second. I apologize about that. Just fighting a cough here, so. But anyway, Abdul Carter is the other guy that I have on this list, edge rusher from Penn State who gets drafted by the New York Giants, of course. I put him on here as a potential Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. There are a number of other guys that could make that award as well, but Abdul Carter is the highly sought-after edge rusher coming out of college, and he has the potential to be a tremendous player, especially along that defensive line. You know, that's an incredible defensive line that they have now with Dexter Lawrence there, and of course they got Brian Burns, who missed some time last year, but Abdul Carter, you add him to that front seven. The Giants are going to have a pretty solid defense. You know, what their offense is going to look like, you know, that remains to be seen. But I think their defense is going to be pretty solid overall. At least that front seven will be anyway. So those are the guys that I have on this list as potential players to win Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Abdul Carter is the only defensive guy that I have on this list to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. But I could also see guys like Malachi Starks, guys like Jahdae Barron from the Broncos, you know, a number of guys that could potentially win Rookie of the Year defensively. So, but those are the 5 guys that I have that are most likely to win those awards. So when we come back, we're going to get into the 4th segment of our show here. We're going to talk some college football. We're going to talk top 5 college quarterbacks coming in to this upcoming season. And this is just my list. Doesn't mean it's the right list. Doesn't mean it's the wrong list. Just my list. So don't take too much offense if you don't agree with what I say. So just stick with us. We'll be right back right after this next break here. And we're going to talk some college football right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show here. We're going to get right into our next segment. We're going to talk some college football, some college quarterbacks, top 5 quarterbacks that I have coming into this upcoming season. Excuse me, still trying to fight over this cough there. I just had a little bit of a coughing fit there and break, so I apologize for that. But getting right into it, at number 5, I have Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. Taking a look at some of the things that he did last year, his numbers last year, 64.2% completion percentage, and just over 4,000 yards passing at 4,052, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions with a 142.7 quarterback rating. The thing that is really good about Nussmeier, not only is his experience, but it's his arm. He has incredible arm strength, has an absolute cannon for an arm. Can't stress enough how important arm strength is if you want to be an elite quarterback. He does need to learn how to kind of harness it a little better, make better decisions, things like that. But just about any college quarterback has those sorts of things that they need to work on. So it's not really super surprising or super concerning for that matter. But he's great at avoiding sacks as well. He can keep plays alive. Does a lot of similar things to like what you would think, not saying he's on this level, but does a lot of things that are similar to like a Josh Allen, making plays with his feet, keeping plays alive, things like that. They've had a lot of problems the last 2 seasons, LSU has, but it hasn't been Garrett Nussmeier that has been that issue. It's not been really the offensive side of the ball at all that's been an issue for them, but Garrett Nussmeier, I'm sure, will be mentioned a lot as we get closer to next year's NFL draft and as we get going in the college football season. He'll be one of those names that are up there as one of those guys in that list of quarterbacks that are supposedly coming out next year in the NFL draft. It's supposed to be a very, very good quarterback class coming into next year for the draft. So this year is going to be very fun to watch all of those guys. Now, at number 4 is a guy that's pretty polarizing, especially up here where I'm at. I get a lot of Penn State fans around here. A lot of them kind of have complaints about. The next guy on my list is Drew Aller from Penn State. But his numbers, they don't really lie. I mean, his numbers are good. He had 3,300 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 153.5 quarterback rating, 66.5% completion percentage, led his team to the college football playoffs, and 1 win away from a national title. Obviously, they weren't able to get there, but he's a polarizing guy. As far as his talent, he's got the talent. It's there. When you watch him play, it's pretty easy to see why he was a highly rated recruit and why some NFL scouts are pretty high on him. But the problem is that he looks great against teams that Penn State are better than. That's against lesser teams is when he really looks good. But when he has to play big-time competition, that's when he kind of struggles a little bit. Even in Penn State's playoff wins, he was kind of underwhelming, but they were able to get through some of those games for the most part because of all the other players that they had on that team, whether it be the running back position or, of course, Abdul Carter on defense. But Penn State, they enter this year with a lot fewer questions than most other programs in the Big Ten. They're returning a lot of really, really good talent, and they are aiming pretty high this year. Going to be considered one of the favorites to win the national title this year. Whether or not they get there, that's a whole other story because, of course, James Franklin has not been able to really win the big one yet since being the head coach of Penn State. But Drew Aller is definitely a guy to watch out for, especially this coming this coming college football season. I think he is a solid quarterback. Obviously, I have him on my top 5 list for a reason, so he's definitely a solid quarterback. Whether or not that translates to the NFL will be a whole other story, but that's where I have him at number 4. So number 3, maybe not everybody puts this guy at number 3, but I like the potential out of him. Sawyer Robertson from Baylor. Last year, he didn't start every single game. He didn't start the season as the starter, but came in a little bit later on in the season, and they became a much better team when he did enter the lineup. Last year, his numbers, 62.2% completion percentage, 3,071 yards, 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 153.1 rating. So, like I said, he didn't start the entire season as the starter. But when he did become the starter, they were a much better team. And he's really the biggest reason why a lot of people are kind of high on Baylor. And Baylor could potentially be a college football playoff hopeful next year. They may be considered a long shot by some people, but when you have a solid quarterback, you always have a chance. And that is what Baylor has right now. And Sawyer Robertson is the unquestioned starter. We actually did a season preview of Baylor a few shows ago. If you want to go back and check that out, you can do that. We talked a lot about Sawyer Robertson and what he can bring to this team this year as his first full season as a starter. And, of course, he could be one of those names that you look at as a guy that could get drafted pretty high, depending on how his season goes here with Baylor and whether or not he, decides to come back for another year or if he wants to go into the draft after this year. That's a whole other question, too. But, so he is a solid player. Baylor should be good offensively just simply because of him. So, we'll have to see how it all shakes out in the end. But moving on, number 2 on this list is Arch Manning from Texas. It'd be hard not to create a list like this without putting him on the list. The only difference with Arch Manning is that this would be his first season as a starter. Now, he did play some games last year, not against great competition. He had 3 games that he played and looked very, very good, admittedly. Played very well. Comes from a Manning family, the football family. So he's definitely got it in his blood to be able to be a very, very good quarterback. There is talk that he may not come out after this year to the NFL, because I know a lot of people were talking about him as a potential number 1 draft pick next year, as he's getting all the hype. And you could say that's because he's a Manning, but he does have the tools. He's a very good quarterback. It will be interesting to see how he handles a full season as a starter, though, in the SEC, one of the toughest conferences in college football. So that'll be tough for him to get through, but he doesn't have a ton of experience from what we saw last year, but if he can reach that same kind of potential that he's been since he was recruited, then he could end up being a very, very good piece for any team. And he is a big reason why Texas is considered by many people as one of the favorites to win the SEC next year. And we didn't see much of him last year, but we saw enough to kind of justify that recruiting hype. I think like I said, a lot of the recruiting hype probably has to do with the fact that he is a Manning, but he still has to put the football, he has to put the film on and, put the plays out there on the field. So once he's, able to do that consistently as the starter, then he's really going to, flourish and really going to get a lot more hype, especially if he comes in as a starter and really, goes off this year. I think it would probably benefit him for staying an extra year after this year just to kind of fine-tune all of his skill sets. But we'll have to see how this season goes and if he decides to come out or just stay in school for another year for Texas. I'm sure Texas fans would probably want that, especially if he is as good as advertised. So we'll see. But the number one guy that I have on this list, and I know he's a number one guy on a lot of other people's lists, but that is Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Last year, he had tremendous numbers, won the ACC for Clemson, beating SMU in that pretty entertaining ACC championship game. But he had 63.4% completion percentage last year, 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 148.3 quarterback rating. So with Klubnik, some people could say that they were kind of skeptical on him heading into last year. In his first game against Georgia, didn't really do anything to kind of sway that notion. But as the season went along, you really started to see the quality in his play. The schedule got a lot easier, which kind of helped him gain his confidence back, helped him play a lot better. And then when you kind of look around, there's no real quarterback out there that really matches his combination of experience and talent and production. And like I said, he won the ACC last year, and he is very likely to do so again in 2025, depending on what happens with SMU, who came out of nowhere last year, and they still have a lot of talent on that team as well. So that's a team to watch out for. And I think the ACC as a whole will probably be a little bit better than they were last year, so it may not be so simple for Clemson to just win the ACC again, but they are the favorites, and there's favorites for a reason, and that reason mainly, I think, is Cade Klubnik. I really like what he could potentially bring to an NFL team as well, but especially this year for Clemson. So that is my list of 5 guys that I think are the best quarterbacks coming into this coming season. I'll go through it again. Number 5, I have Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. Number 4, Drew Aller from Penn State. Number 3, Sawyer Robertson from Baylor. Number 2, Arch Manning, Texas. And number 1, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. All of those guys, high-quality quarterbacks, and I'm sure they should have a pretty solid season this coming year. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a break real quick. And when we come back, we've got our final segment of the show. It is the USC Outlook. Obviously, USC has been in the news the past couple of days because they had got a couple of good recruits, and we'll talk about them here in this next segment. So stick with us, and we'll be right back for our final segment of the day. All right, guys, welcome back to the show here on this Monday edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. We're going to get right into our USC outlook here. Obviously, USC has been in the news the past couple of days because of their recruiting. They have gone very, very hard in getting recruits this offseason. They've invested a ton of money in this team as a whole, just constructing a bigger, stronger, and more talented football team. Lincoln Riley, a lot of pressure on him as the head coach to bring in a competent and a competitive team this year, a team that could potentially get to the college football playoff, get back to that glory that we used to see with USC several years ago. But over the weekend, as I mentioned before, they increased their lead over the rest of the nation in their recruiting standpoints anyway. They landed 3 highly rated commitments. The wave started on Thursday. USC landed Kenyi Pope, the number 9 player and number 3 offensive tackle in the entire nation. And he's coming out of IMG Academy. And on Friday, USC nabbed cornerback Albert Hill, the number 101 overall prospect out of Akron, Ohio. Big time get right there for USC. Then on Saturday, the Trojans added Luke Weaver, who is a 3-star wide receiver out of nearby Sherman Oaks, California. So 3 highly talented recruits that the Trojans were able to get commits from this past weekend. So that kind of goes into the whole preview of USC's season here. Those are 3 players that could come in and make impacts relatively soon. It'll be a long way to go to see, how they develop and everything, since they will be freshmen. But there's still some positivity, some hope there, especially with what USC has been able to do on the recruiting trail so far this offseason. So, definitely good moves for USC, of course. So, moving on to USC as a team, though, this coming season, they will have a new and reformed quarterback room heading into next season. Only 1 scholarship quarterback is returning from the past season, and that is Jaden Mayava. Houston Longstreet and Sam Heward are also exciting options for Lincoln Riley. All 3 of those guys should be very, very good. Mayava is the guy coming back, returning from the past season. But the Trojans' starting quarterback room, it's going to be led most likely by Jaden Mayava. And Utah transfer Sam Heward, most likely going to be the backup, but he will be competing along with true freshman Houston Longstreet, who's expected to give him pretty stiff competition in the fall and, spring ball leading up to fall football. But last year, Mayava appeared in 7 games, started the last 4 games of the season, and Lincoln Riley made the decision to pull quarterback Miller Moss in favor of Mayava after a 4-5 start to the season. So that's how he was able to get into the lineup. And when he was in the lineup for those 4 games that he played, he had a 3-1 record, had wins over UCLA, Nebraska, and Texas A&M, and then lost to Notre Dame in the Las Vegas Bowl. So those are definitely guys that you want to keep an eye on for quarterback-wise. But as far as his numbers are concerned, 1,201 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions for USC's, for Jordan Mayava. And in that loss to Notre Dame, Mayava threw 2 interceptions. And in the Trojans Bowl win that they had, he threw 3 interceptions, which was a career high for him. So he threw 3 interceptions, but still got the win, of course. So, but he, like I said, had 6 interceptions. So with 5 of those interceptions coming in 2 games, essentially, he was able to be relatively efficient in the other games. But still, you want to cut back on those interceptions. You don't want to have 3 interceptions and make that a habit, because you won't be a starter very long, no matter where you are. But as far as their running back room is concerned, they'll have 6 members this spring, headlined by transfers Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders, and returning player Brian Jackson. Jordan rushed for 1,600 yards and 20 touchdowns at JUCO national champion Hutchinson Community College last year. He also caught 6 passes for 43 yards and 1 touchdown. Sanders rushed for 1,063 yards and 9 touchdowns on 147 carries at New Mexico State last year. So production all across the board for USC at the running back position. Against Texas A&M in Las Vegas last year, Jackson rushed for 66 yards and a touchdown on 16 carries, and his overall total last year was, not including that game, was 188 yards and a touchdown last year for Jackson. So not as much experience on that regard for Brian Jackson, but he still is coming back. He is one of the few returning players, so I'm sure he will get some carries, maybe not the lion's share of the carries, though. But another returning running back who will participate in spring ball is Amarian Peterson. He'll be joined by the true freshman early enrollees Harry Dalton III and Riley Wormley. Wormley will most likely be out for the spring practice due to suffering a knee injury in high school. So that is something to keep an eye on as we keep going, as spring football continues, spring practice continues, and all of that. So at the wide receiver position, going into spring camp, which is headlined by Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. They return the team's top two receivers from last season in Lemon and Lane. And Lemon was a rising third-year junior, was the Trojans' leading receiver last year with 52 catches, 764 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And Lane ended his second-year sophomore campaign with 43 catches for 525 yards and 12 touchdowns. So very, very productive for him, of course. His 12 touchdowns tied for third nationally among all college football wideouts. So that is a good player to have returning to your lineup for sure. USC also returns Jay Fair, who was a reserve, a fourth-year senior, Xavier Jordan, a redshirt freshman, Josiah Zamora, a fifth-year senior, and Jaden Richardson, a sixth-year senior. That group combined to catch 9 passes for 87 yards and just the 1 touchdown last season. So not a ton of experience in that lineup there, but, of course, they can still be quality players and they can get something out of this offense. And, of course, adding in some freshman talent in the recruiting trail just in this past couple of days here, that will also add a little bit of a wrinkle to that wide receiver room. So we'll see how that all shakes out as well. Defensively, the interior defensive line going into spring camp was headlined by some young depth and massive transfer additions in both nose tackles Keyshawn Silver and Jamal Jarrett. USC returns emerging veteran Devin Tompkins, who will be a favorite to start at defensive tackle, and nose tackle Kobe Pepe, who has added 20 pounds this offseason. So trying to get a little thicker on that defensive line there. The Trojans also returned several young defensive tackles in Carlin Jones, Jide Abasiri, Radomana Bulabaluvu. The program also welcomed 3 defensive tackles from the 2025 class in Floyd Boucard, Cash Jacobson, and 4-star Jakeem Stewart, and they will play defensive end as well. Linebacker is also headlined by returning star redshirt senior Eric Gentry, and also some young potential to go along with that. But Gentry himself was playing at an All-American level through the first run of the season before his injury started to pile up. He had some head injuries, some concussions, things like that. So that's a concern always for sure. The room will officially welcome former defensive back Anthony Beaver Jr., who moved to linebacker in the middle of the season last year. So linebacker room will be a little bit different in that regard. But the room loses plenty of experience as well. 2 of the 3 starters graduating, leaving the door open for the youth to step up, mainly sophomore Desmond Stevens. There's also going to be depth concerns for the room with such inexperience on the field and only 2 incoming freshmen in the summer. So USC will need to think of potentially adding some transfer depth as well. So, and they have already, shown that they're, of course, not really shy about doing that. So for sure, that's going to be something to watch. With these additions and all of this outlook just overall, I could see USC competing to potentially, get up there. I think they'll be pretty competitive in the Big Ten for sure overall. I don't quite see them as a college football playoff team yet, though. There's still just too many questions. Quarterback is still kind of a question mark. You're not really sure if you're going to get consistent play out of whoever it is that winds up being the starter there, whether it's Sam Heward or Mayava or, whatever the case. So quarterback is a question mark. So I could see them getting to possibly about maybe 7 or 8 wins. The odds right now have the Trojans at about 7.5 wins. I could see them doing like kind of right around that level. I think that's a pretty good number to be at for USC. 8, possibly 9 wins, but it is the Big Ten that they're in, though. It's not the Pac-12 anymore. So, it's going to be a tough road for USC. But I don't think they're going to get into the college football playoffs, though. That's just where I'm at with USC overall. So that is my outlook for USC. If you guys agree, disagree, whatever the case, just want to comment, whatever it is, definitely feel free to do that. But that's going to wrap up our Monday show. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Those of you who stuck around to watch it, I appreciate it. And as always, I thank you guys all for joining us on this show. GSMC Football Podcast, as always, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support does mean a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. And we also invite you to follow us on all the social medias, whether that be Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And I thank you guys once again for joining us. I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we'll see you same time, same place right here on the GSMC Football Podcast tomorrow night. Thanks, guys, once again for joining the show. Have a good night.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.